All right. And as I often, as I say, when we start these wonderful sessions together, first of all, thank you everybody for being here, and especially huge thanks to Barry Jacobs. So I met Barry when Zinnia was, Zinnia is still a small startup, I would say, but we were, somebody routed us to Barry to just kind of get some advice and to talk some things through. And I've been so fortunate to maintain the relationship over the years with Barry, who I consider just an amazing mentor and has just such a wonderful gift for clarity and empathy and compassion. And so when I approached him and humbly asked if he would please come be a guest and chat with some caregivers, and he was willing to do it, I sent an email to my partner Bill and I was like, Barry said yes. And we were both like doing our little happy dance because we were just so thrilled to have Barry here. So, Barry, thank you for that. The intention in
It's really
these
for me to
sessions.
thank you. This is a great opportunity, and I don't think you say you humbly asked me. You don't have to ask me twice to do something like this. I always say yes.
So everybody noticed that, right? He'll always say yes. Um, and the intention here is both first to start off by tapping into Barry's wisdom. I'm going to ask him a few questions and he's going to share some interesting things with us. And this session is about uh, uh, acknowledging that everybody in this room, Barry is an expert, but everybody in this room is an expert because you know the person that you support really well. And there are things that you do every day that you have figured out that make life easier and that make things run more smoothly that other people haven't figured out yet. And so it's a great opportunity for people to ask questions and for us as a group to brainstorm and try to help each other through anything that is kind of sticky for you right now. It's also a wonderful opportunity to celebrate things that are going really well. If there's something that you've figured out and you're like, man, I just want to acknowledge the fact that I'm doing something well. We are the people to do it with. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Barry Jacobs. And Barry, maybe you could just go ahead and talk a little bit about who you are, and then I really want to focus on the book that you just published and ask you some questions about that, and then talk about some caregiver specific issues.
Absolutely, Allison. And again, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you all for joining us. And I hope this will be a conversation. I really want to hear from you and what you're doing and what you've learned. So I'll give you the kind of short version of a long story. When I was 14, my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer, and his first symptom was aphasia. He, turned to speak with me one night, and out of his mouth came a string of gibberish. And my dad was a lawyer. He was a litigator, which means that right from the moment of his illness became apparent, he was unable to work. And so he lived for another year and died when I was 15. His death, his illness had enormous impact on me and my family. And my family went through a very hard time, including during my father's illness and then afterwards, a real schism between my mother and my father's mother, my grandmother, who really had a kind of power struggle over who was going to control my father's care. But I learned at a very early age that about cognitive issues because my dad's brain cancer had very significant impact on his ability to think. But I also learned very early on how serious illness really is not an individual issue; it's a family issue. And I grew up, and I didn't decide right then and there to become a clinical psychologist focusing on family caregiving. I was a journalist for about 5 years, but eventually I made my way to graduate school, and in graduate school found that I really wanted to work with individuals and families dealing with serious and chronic illness, and a lot of that was dementia. And then I've spent my whole career, which is now this month is 40 years that I started graduate school in psychology, which is a long time. But I really doing a lot of work over a lot of years, mostly in medical settings with individuals with illness and a lot of family caregiving. Because I was a journalist, because I love to write, I've written 4 books, 3 of them on family caregiving, including the AARP Caregiver Answer book, which we'll talk about today. I also want to mention because I mean, without personal experience, it's really hard to claim to be an expert in anything regarding caregiving. So I had my experience with my dad as a teenager, but then in my 50s, my wife and I cared for first her father who had vascular dementia, and then within 6 months of his death, caring then for my stepfather with Alzheimer's disease, and then following his death, caring for my mother with vascular dementia, and that was about a 9 year period of caring for them. And prior to that, I had already written one book on family caregiving, and I thought I knew something about family caregiving. But then, when I was actually back, really on the front line with my mother and stepfather, I learned a whole lot of new things, and learned that maybe I didn't know as much as I thought I knew as a so-called expert prior to that. Um, so I've written these books. I also have a column on the AARP website that I've had since 2013, writing about family caregiving on either a monthly or every other month basis. And I really have had the opportunity to work with lots of families, thousands of families. And I mean, it's been the great privilege of my life to do this and to really be here with you and to my whole goal in doing this work is to help families do a better job of dealing with illness, dealing with dementia better than my own family did. My own family, unfortunately, became a real mess because of some of the family dynamics, and so I want to help other families do a better job than my own did. For the goal of making families stronger at the end of the day, not weaker. And so that's what I wish for all of us and all of you in the work that you're doing.
Wow. I love your story. I mean, I hate your story, right? Because it's a sad story. And yet at the same time, what you are bringing to us and to the world, because of what you learned is just amazing. So thank you so much. I would like to, and I love the way that you've blended your background in journalism with caregiving so that you've been able to share in such a meaningful way with people. Um, Barry and I, just before we opened the room and let everybody in, we acknowledged that we share a common problem, which is that when we get excited, we start talking really, really fast. So at any point, if either of us is talking too quickly, please, anybody, feel free to say, slow down. We appreciate the reminder and we'll try to help each other as well. But I will not be doing a lot of talking. I want to hear from Barry. And so, Barry, I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask you is what inspired you to write this particular book? Because I know you have written other books. What brought this one about?
So just to give you a little idea of what this book is, and that'll help set up my explanation. So that I had written two previous books on family caregiving that took very different angles. So what this book is, it's about 150 common questions that caregivers ask in a variety of topics like family dynamics, self-care, but also how to manage finances, how to deal with healthcare professionals, how to deal with anticipatory grief and then grief after your loved one dies. So the book is 150 questions in 13 chapters with the answers that not just myself, but my wife, who's also a psychologist, Julia Mayer, she and I have developed over the years in response to these questions. And so the whole point here is every time somebody kind of is new to caregiving, maybe their father or mother is diagnosed with dementia, or maybe their spouse is diagnosed, and they find themselves in this kind of new world, which is a very alien world. A lot of the same questions come up. What am I doing here? What's supposed to, how do I do right? How do I mess this up? How do I deal with the guilt feelings that I have? How do I get my brother to help me? The same questions over the years have come up again and again and again. And so the purpose of this book is really to try to answer some of those questions so that especially for new caregivers, that they don't feel so lost because unfortunately, even doing this time in and everybody has caring for part of forever, um, difficult caregiving. But when people suddenly are faced with this now, it's so disorienting, it's so overwhelming, so emotionally. uh, overpowering, that have some guidance by answering some basic questions. That's really what we wanted to provide people so that they can get the lay of the land and kind of really feel like they're on track and that and that in the course of this, they're going to learn a lot and they're going to be okay. And that's mostly what I want for folks at the end of the day.
Thank you for that. And what was the hardest part about writing this book?
Um, well, I think I mean, so writing of any book is hard. I mean, because you have to kind of take things that you maybe have been popping around in your head for a long time and and get them organized and then on paper. I think for me, for this book, there were aspects of family caregiving that I kind of knew a little, but I didn't know as much as as I probably should have. So, for instance, I'm really terrible with money. My wife took the checkbook away from me years ago because I was bouncing checks left and right in the days when we used to have checkbooks and we could bounce checks. Um, so, the idea of writing a chapter, for instance, on managing finances, it took a lot of research to kind of basically get a better idea of just some of the challenges of how do you do the best you can with the funding, the funds you have. How could caregivers get paid for caregiving? There were lots of questions that I knew I had partial answers to, but I had to really dig in and really provide more authoritative answers. So this was a learning process for me. And then just in general, knowing which questions were going to be the ones we wanted to include in the book and which ones were maybe of interest to me, but not necessarily going to be of interest to other people.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to ask everybody to just ponder for a moment. If there is a question that you can think of that is kind of just a nagging question, that you would love to see if it's in Barry's book, go ahead and pop it into the chat because
All right,
we're
these folks are gonna stump me right out of the gate here.
that's our goal. The name of this episode is Let's Stump Barry. So pop things into the chat if there's a question that you have. And while you're working on that, I am going to ask or invite Barry to, you've got 150 different things that you cover in that book. I would love it if you would share with us two or three that you think are especially relevant to people who are dementia caregivers. Maybe they're questions that came up over and over again, or questions that you continually run into in your good work.
So let me answer that question a couple different ways. So there are some basic caregiving questions, not necessarily specific to dementia, that come up all the time. And
Mhm.
so, one question is, how do I make sure that I'm going to do a good job? I mean, nobody does this. Nobody walks into this and takes this responsibility on without having some idea about um, um, having some hope that they're going to actually do a good job and they're not going to mess us up.
Mhm.
But oftentimes people feel very unsure of themselves because they just don't know the lay of the land, and they realize they don't know what they don't know, and they're afraid that because of things that they don't know, they're going to make a mistake. So that's true for dementia caregiving as well as for other forms of caregiving. It's like my loved one has dementia. So a very common question that comes up in that regard is, do I treat them like they're fine, and or do I tell them that, do I remind them of everything that they're forgetting? Um so am I in the role of am I correcting them in the hopes that my corrections will make them sharper, or am I supporting them with the by telling them everything that they can't remember? And so the answer is neither, right? The answer is probably somewhere in between, that we want to give folks, we want to help the folks with dementia uh, use their cognitive abilities to the best of their ability. We want to, and realizing that's going to change over time, even within a given day. It may change over the course of a day. But so that's a very common question. Um, another question that often comes up in the context of caregiving in general, also dementia caregiving, is how do I encourage, recruit, whatever verb you want to use, family members to actually step up and help? Or is it just easier for me to do this all myself? And so the short answer to that, by the way, is not that it's not easier if you do it all by yourself, even if it means when you bring other family members in, you're bringing in other people who have different opinions, and you have to contend with those opinions. When it becomes a group decision-making process, it becomes more complicated. But the folks that decide, no, 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 I'm not going to let my adult children be involved. I'm not going to let other family members be involved. It's just easier if I do it myself. They're the ones that have a tendency over time to burn out because they've taken on so much on their own shoulders. And we all know dementia is not a short-term disease; it's a long-term disease. So that the amount of care that is being provided over time just wears people out. So, but those are some common questions about
Mhm.
caring for someone with dementia. Certainly, there are also lots of questions about dementia itself, the course of dementia, about some of the treatments for dementia, which many of which are not that effective as we know, but there's more hope in some of the newer treatments. How much hope should we put in them? Um, and then how do we help still find joy in living? I mean, dementia. I mean, I can tell you that especially with my stepfather's Alzheimer's disease, because his was quite advanced and he was very agitated a lot of time. We had some very difficult times with him. He would be up in the middle of the night wandering. He had always been a very handy guy. He would get a hold of the toolbox in the middle of the night and start taking apart the faucets from the sink. He took all the metal covers off of all the electrical outlets one day. Um, so, I mean, there were some very difficult times, but how do we still, even in the midst of that, find ways of enjoying him, enjoying each other, still making moments of joy? Because in the end, when the person has died, what we want to remember is not them at their worst. We want to remember them at their best. And so, how do we help shape those moments that we'll have for their sake and for our own sake that we'll have better memories later?
And could you answer that?
Um, I mean, that would take me a while, so the PS is we can't focus only on care. It can't be all about completing tasks. Being a caregiver is not simply about having a long to-do list every day and going down and crossing task after task off the list as we complete them. It's about living with this person. It's about bringing the most out in them. It's about finding ways of appreciating and enjoying them and having them enjoy us. And that means creating what I call tender memories, creating things that, moments where we look at the photo album together, moments where we take a walk together, moments where we just sit together and watch a movie. It doesn't have to be anything more special than that. But those moments are in and of themselves special because they're not about tasks. They're not about getting things done. They're not about caring for the disease. They're just about being together as people who care for one another. And that's what we want.
Mm, I love that. We have some really great discussion points in the chat.
I
Um,
saw that, and it makes me afraid to even look at them.
yeah, this is going to be scary, but we're going to dive into some of this stuff. I wanted to just ask Nisi, since I know that your time is short, you said that you learned about the 211 caregiver phone program in 25 states through the AARP and United Way. Can you chat a little bit about that? I know it's not in Washington, but many people on this call are not in Washington, so share about that if you would.
Yeah. So on that note, I just learned about it. So I'm learning as I go. Barry probably knows way more than me. Basically, it's a phone line you can call for support and resources. My understanding is they have experts on there that will help guide you and inform you of what's out there to support you as a caregiver. Did I get that right, Barry?
Yes, I mean, the 211 is a great resource, and as you point out, it's not in every state. So let me give you an alternative resource, which is what you're asking for. So probably a lot of you are familiar with a national caregiver advocacy group called the Caregiver Action Network, sometimes called CAN, CAN. And CAN has a caregiver phone line. That's not exactly the name of it. I don't remember the exact name of it, but if you look on the Caregiver Action Network website, they have a phone resource which, during the week, during business hours, you can call and speak with a caregiver resource expert. Then the CAN resource line is run by a company in Chicago called Carallel. And those caregiver resource network folks, sometimes called caregiver coaches, sometimes called caregiver advisors, they have access to information from all over the country to guide you to resources in your community. And so there's no cost for that. But if you don't have 211 available to you, this is a very good way of getting information about how to find a home health aide in your community, how to find an adult daycare program in your community, how to perhaps find a caregiver support group. So lots of good information available at no cost.
Thank you so much.
I love
Very
that. And I'm
welcome.
popping a few things into the chat. And I didn't realize that Carol L was supporting the Caregiver Action Network.
Yeah, they are the vendor that Caregiver Action Network hired to do this work.
That's so cool. So shameless self-promotion. We work with Carol L because they use our Zinnia's training videos, which
Mm.
are,
I'm
I mean,
really
they're,
glad. I'm glad to hear that. And by the way, Carol's a great company, and so is Zinnia, and your company should be working together.
yeah, it's really lovely. I don't know if many of you know about the Kitty Norton's movie Wine, Women, and Dementia, but the reason I met Matt Perrin, who's with Carol L, because he and I both worked with Kitty on that movie. We were both like friends of hers who were caring for family members. Anyways, it's a teeny weeny little world, I always say, unless you have to clean it. Um, all right, let's go ahead and start. Nisi, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's great stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and start at the top. And so Tamara, do you want to pop on and ask your question? I will invite you to do that. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it from chat. And if you don't respond, I'll just read it from chat. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read Tamara's question, which is balancing work and caregiving. Ideas of work or types of jobs that might be more compatible with this role.
Okay, and this is covered in the book. The book, by the way, because we haven't mentioned the name of the book yet. The latest book is called the AARP Caregiver Answer Book, and I just happen to have a copy here to point out to show everybody. There it is.
And I
So
did put a link to it in the chat.
yeah, thank you. And so there's my shameless plug. But Tamara, so so let's think about this for a little bit. Because there are lots of different ways of answering this question. So first, this is a very stressful thing to do to balance work and be a caregiver. And so the first thing to do is to kind of accept that this is going to be inherently stressful. It's inherently stressful for lots of reasons. One is because we're all human beings and we have limited energy and we have limited hours in the day to work with. And when we are managing work responsibilities and family caregiving responsibilities, we're being spread thin.
Mhm.
And second, so what that means, secondly, is we have to really be kind to ourselves and accept the things that we're doing the best that we can. So one of the things that happened to me when I was caring for my mother and stepfather is I was also working a full-time job as a psychologist and as a faculty member in a family medicine residency program. And I felt I was doing a terrible job at everything. I was doing a terrible job at work. I was doing a terrible job as a son and stepson. I wasn't being a very good husband. I wasn't being a very good father to my teenage children. I felt that I needed to do better at all these things, and yet I couldn't figure out how to do that. And I got very down on myself, and I also felt very guilty all the time. So one of the things that I came to, and with the help of my wife, who's not just my wife, but she's a psychologist and she's knows me better than anybody, is I had to really kind of lower my own expectations of myself. I could only ask of myself to do the best that I could do. I couldn't be perfect in any of these things. So I had to really lower some of my own work standards. So that was part of balancing work and caregiving. Another is I really had to have an honest conversation with my boss about what was going on. And unfortunately, the statistics suggest that many employees of companies do not share with their employers what's going on for them because they're afraid they're going to get discriminated against as a consequence. And what I mean by discriminated against is that they're not going to get fired, but that maybe they're going to be passed over for promotions, passed over for work projects. The employer is not going to are not going to see them as being as potentially devoted as devoted to the company and as reliable as they might be if they weren't also caregiving. And so they don't tell their boss, and then they really feel like they're kind of having a more difficult time juggling all the more because the people that they work with don't know what's going on. Fortunately, I had a boss who was really very supportive, and one of the most important things he gave me was flex time, that I could go to medical appointments for my mother and stepfather. I could, if need be, go to the hospital if they were hospitalized. I could work in some of my caregiving obligations in with my work day, and then find other, if it took time out of my work day, I could make up that work at another time. That flex time, that flexibility, was probably the most important thing I could my boss could have done for me. And then just simply being supportive, asking how my mother and stepfather were, asking how I was doing, helping me focus on my own needs and not neglecting my own needs. So all of that too was part of balancing work and caregiving. But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't shared with my boss that this was going on in my life. And it so happens that he had dealt with caregiving in his own life, so he was very sensitized to this, to the stresses of caregiving, and also wanted to be supportive. So that was a big help. Um, Tamara, before I go on, am I saying things that are helpful? Because I don't really want to say things that are not helpful.
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other ideas that you have that might be helpful that people might want to hear from you?
What I'm doing right now is that I'm working part-time. I'm an independent contractor, so I work gigs. So like I went to work this morning, left breakfast for my dad, came home to eat with him. And then I went to the job, to the gym, hopped on the call, and I'm back to like take him to the gym. So I'm making it work. I don't have a lot of money doing this gigs, but that's just what I'm doing. I live at my sister's house, so rent is not an issue. So we're just making it work.
Wow.
But
Pat yourself
yeah,
on the back there, Tamara, because you're
absolutely.
doing some
Everyone
amazing
should be
work.
packing. Yeah. So what you reminded me of, Tamara, is obviously money is a big issue in balancing work and caregiving. And let me just bring up one other thing. And sometimes this is possible, sometimes it's not. More and more families are deciding to how figure out how to financially support the primary caregiver if the family has the financial means to do so, or to make some arrangement that if the care receiver has any kind of money, that the care receiver pays that primary caregiver with the agreement of the rest of the family. So the way this would work is, and Tamara, I don't know if this is the case for you at all, so I'm not making any assumptions, but let's say it were the case. If you had a brother or a sister, or other family members who had some financial means, and they basically said, we think what you're doing for uh, your dad is a wonderful thing, and we want to support you to do that, especially given the fact that we don't have the time to do what you're doing. So we realize that it's not just a matter of giving you a pat on the back, but we want to make sure you get a paycheck every week or every month from the family to help pay for the bills that maybe you can't pay for right now because you're not working as many hours. And that gets worked out with a lawyer in what's called a care agreement, sometimes called a family care agreement. But it's basically in a financial arrangement where family will pay the primary caregiver. Um, so that's also extremely important. And I'll just tell you one other thing in regards to balancing work and caregiving, and that is more and more caregivers are able to get paid for caregiving, and not simply through the family, but through Medicaid, if the person who's receiving the care qualifies for Medicaid. If they qualify for Medicaid, every state in this country has what's called, it's variously called a self-direction plan. Sometimes they call it a consumer direction plan or a participant direction plan. But if you contact your state's Department of Medicaid, they can tell you about what's available in your state to get paid as a caregiver under Medicaid if your care receiver qualifies for Medicaid. So you don't have to qualify for Medicaid. The person you're caring for has to qualify for Medicaid. And oftentimes, when people have spent money on all sorts of resources to care for them, after a while, through that spend down, they do qualify for Medicaid, and you can get paid on not a huge sum of money, but you can get paid some money for being their caregiver for some number of hours a week or a day, directly from the state.
Cool. And before we move on to the next question, a couple of quick things that I thought of. Of course, the question is, can you leave the home, right? Do you need to be at home with your loved one because you don't have somebody who can spot you? And so there are like gig things like TaskRabbit and Upwork where you can sign up to do jobs. They're usually something using your computer, but you can do it out of your own house. I know that there are caregivers who look for those kinds of things or other gig economy things like walking dogs or whatever it might be that you can do if it fits in with your schedule that day. And so it allows you to be pretty flexible about time. Does anybody want to pop in any ideas that you have, anything that has worked for you as a way to kind of have a job at the same time that you're caregiving? And you can pop it into the chat too. All right, then let's go ahead to the next question. Tamara, I'm going to come back to your second question afterwards. Steve, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. My wife is mixed dementia diagnosis, and she's been about 3 years now. Still, I would consider early stage, but what's beginning to happen more and more often is she's gets down heavily because she is so worried about the fact that she is causing us to have a terrible, terrible life, which we're not. You know, everything's great so far, I must say. Again, she's early stage, so but she's very, very concerned by that. Matter of fact, it's the only thing that seems to really bother her right now is thinking about the future and what that's going to mean to me, not to her, but to me.
Mm.
How do we get them from living that dreaded feeling?
I certainly appreciate that your wife is being very sensitive to you and to the other family members. Here's what I would say to your wife. I would say to her, uh, you have a progressive disease, it's true, but life isn't over. And for most people, this is a very slowly progressing disease. It's going to go on a long time. And it seems like you're focused on what may come to pass in the future, about really having a negative impact on your husband and others in the family in the future. But that's not about today. And really, what we want to do is bring the focus to today, because today is where we enjoy each other. Today is where, I mean, that's basically all we ever have is this present moment. We don't ever have the future. We have the present moment, and we have to make the most of it. And if we spend that present moment feeling guilty about what may come, in essence, we're not allowing ourselves to fully appreciate this present moment. And so I would basically say to your wife, I understand that you're afraid of what's coming and you're afraid of the impact of what's coming, but that's not, it doesn't help you live well now. And if you want to live well now, then you really need to focus on now and not the future, and enjoy being with your husband now and do the things that you love to do, and do the things that are meaningful to you. And I would also say that one way that she can quote unquote help you deal with putting you through this is to make is not only to live as well now, but also to make arrangements for the future, to kind of think about how when the challenges come of decreased cognition and maybe some physical problems as a result of dementia, how does she want to live? Where does she want to live? I'm hoping she has an advance directive. I'm hoping that she has that it's really clear, not just to you, but to everyone in the family, how she wants things to go. Once that's all legal paperwork, once that's all done, I would again bring her back to how does she live the best she can every day for her sake and for your sake.
I want to add one quick thing in there. Barry, I really love that. And especially the reminder that we should have these other things in order, like the advance directive and so on. There was a woman who I met one time who shared that the years that she was caring for her husband's, who was living with dementia, were the best years of their marriage. And she said, because it was the time when we could really focus on each other. Like that was my focus. And it brought me back to the core, the essence of why I fell in love with him in the first place. And so I think it's fair to say to the person that we support, look, I hate this for you, and I hate it for me, and I would never choose a world where you have this disease. But what I want to say is that this thing has allowed me to just realize how much I love you and how much I love being with you. And I am a better person because I have the honor of being able to support you through this. So I don't want to say thank you for being sick, but I do want you to know that I'm stronger and I'm better and I'm tough. I got this. I got this for both of us. This is why I'm doing support groups. This is why I'm taking care of myself because I'm going to be here with you and you can count on me. And I'm not afraid for me, so I don't want you to be afraid for me. Just a
Allison, that is
thought.
so powerful. I mean, it actually brings tears to my eyes. That's exactly right. I mean, I hear this with folks who are dealing with one spouse is dealing with cancer, and it kind of brings them down. Like we don't know how many days ahead we have. We have to make the most of the days that we have, and that's starting with today. Um, Steve, you tell us, is this helpful? I mean, how would this apply for you and your wife?
Yeah, both of you, thank you for your input. I will try this. I honestly, I think I've pretty much tried to do all of that. But the disease is what it is, and her thought process, I haven't been able to convince her yet that what we're saying here, she isn't willing to accept it quite yet. Now, you gave me some other ideas to think about how I can change my approach to take a different way of getting that message across. But yeah,
I'll
it's
give you one
helpful.
other idea and just one other thought. So one other idea that I always bring up to people is, when you beat yourself up for having a disease, it's not your fault. It's like rubbing salt in your own wounds. And why would you do that? Why would you're essentially causing yourself more suffering? You didn't ask for this and you didn't cause this. It's not like you went out and did all, you played, you got to go in and had concussions so you'd be more likely to get dementia one day. I mean, nobody does things like that. This is a terrible disease that no one asked for and no one's responsible for.
That's a great idea. I think that would actually help her. I believe that.
I
Good.
love
And let me
that.
give you one other thought, and really quick, as I know we want to go into other questions, and that is, it's always important, Steve, to keep in mind that one of the early hallmarks of dementia is depression and anxiety. And it has to do with the way the brain is changed and the way, in particular, the neurotransmitter, the hormone imbalances in the brain are changed as a result of the disease. And one of the things we know is that what they call excessive and inappropriate guilt. That's one of the symptoms of major depressive disorder. And if your wife is just going on and on about feeling guilty all the time, I would probably have her evaluated for depression.
Yeah, I like that. And Janice, you had something to say.
I did. I just, for people that come into, I always say it's not the end of the road, it's just a bend in the road. And, if somebody does have a diagnosis, they report too that, life does slow down, but now they have time to enjoy that sunrise and that sunset and,
Mhm.
enjoy the outdoors and, things that maybe they've always kind of put off. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question from Allie. Allie, did you want to pop in and say something? And if you don't, I'll happily read it. I'm going to go ahead and read Allie's question. She says, how does one approach discussion and follow through on respite care bed stays? For example, mom with dementia, her going to a short stay respite bed to give the caregiver some relief or to be in a safe place while the caregiver is out of town. Or does one bring in home care supports to keep home routine for less change of delirium and cognitive decline? Or does respite bed offer more cognitive stimulation? So if I need respite, if we ask for a show of hands of who could use a little bit more respite, I know that every hand would go up. So the question of so how do we handle that? Telling somebody I need a break, and so therefore you either need to go stay at a respite place or I need to bring somebody in to take care of you. Barry, I just wonder what your thoughts are about that. And she says, how does one approach that discussion with the person with dementia?
Yeah, so then let's tell you what, we do cover this at some length in the book. So let's kind of define respite. So what is respite? Respite is a fancy term for means getting a break, and and more research suggests that even when we get a 20-minute break, a half-hour break, 2-hour break, it makes us more resilient. We're able to deal with the stress better. Being able to kind of step out of the caregiver role matters. And there is respite there's different types of respite, and they usually breaks down into in-home respite, where someone comes in, and it could be a neighbor stops by and sits with the person you're caring for an hour, so you can go, get your hair done, or maybe it's something where you have someone, you go away for a weekend, but you have around the clock personal care aides coming and staying with your loved one. So that's in-home respite. The other type of respite is a facility-based respite, where many counties, many states have programs where they'll pay for a caregiver to place a loved one in a nursing home, generally for at least for a weekend, sometimes for as long as 2 weeks, and let you do that once a year, twice a year, because they know that those longer breaks enable caregivers to recharge their batteries and to be better able to continue being a caregiver and not burn out. So respite is really important and makes a big difference. So how do you talk about this with the person who needs care? You do it, I think you do it very gently, and you do it maybe repeatedly, but you also do it firmly. And so what I mean by that is there's not anybody who has dementia who really wants you to have respite, or not. Let me take that back. Most folks with dementia are maybe fearful of other folks coming into the home. They may be fearful of going to facility. They may feel like, oh my God, you're going to put me there forever. You're never going to let me out of there. It's just a way, you're just trying to trick me so you can get rid of me. Many folks with dementia are afraid of feeling like a burden, and this idea that you need a break from them makes them all the more feel like a burden. So those are all challenges, but what I think you basically have to say is, I've been advised to take some time for myself, because there are things that I need to do for myself. And if I, I want to, I'm absolutely committed to continue to care for you. But by giving me a break, whether it be for a few hours or a few days or a couple of weeks, it'll help me regain the energy I need to do as good a job as I can caring for you.
Mhm.
And I have seen loved ones accept that, and I've also seen loved ones basically say, "No, I still want you to be here with me all the time." And then the caregiver has to basically go ahead and make the decision that they're going to go ahead and take the respite anyway. You can the care receiver doesn't get to dictate to the caregiver how the caregiver does all the caregiving. As a caregiver, you're not required to do everything the care receiver says. What you're required to do is to make sure that they have good care. Good care means your daughter-in-law comes over and sits for a few hours with your wife, if you want to go out off and do something. It could mean that you do make use of a good nursing home that you trust in the community, that's not far from home, and that you take that weekend to maybe go to a wedding in a different part of the country, or to do something that will bring you some joy in order for you to continue to be the best caregiver you can be. So sometimes it really comes down to having to insist upon this and not giving the care receiver the choice. Am I in
Yeah,
the
I think that
ballpark?
sounds right. One thing I would advise people not to do, and I've heard caregivers talk about this, is they said, well, what I told him is that I'm sick, so I need to go away for a while. And I'm like, no, because then they're going to worry about you. And are you going to be healthy enough to take care of me? And boy, that imperative, I thank you for what you just said, Barry, because so my husband passed away in 2019, and yet I still sometimes 2 a.m. is about the right time. And I lie in bed and I'm like, I shouldn't have, I took these breaks and I left him alone. I should have been spending that time with him. And you just reminded me that, like, no, I had to take that time away because it's the only way that I was then able to be there for him the other times. So I really appreciate what you just said. It means so much to me. And there are just some non-negotiables, right? We just can't be the nice guy all the time. We have to take care of ourselves. And even if that means that sometimes it's not really the way that the person with dementia wants it to be, we matter too. I think it's so important for us to recognize that our health and well-being are very, very important, because if something happens to us, who's going to take care of the person that we support?
Absolutely. I would go further, Allison. I'd say, so what family caregiving is about is not just caring for the person with a disease, but caring for every family member and meeting all of their needs. And so you can't sacrifice the well-being of everyone in the family just for the loved one with dementia. Everybody has to be cared for, because that's how families thrive, and that's how they stay strong to deal with a challenge like dementia.
Absolutely. And I'm going to move us along because we do have a few more questions. Jane, do you want to pop up and ask your question, or oh, you're there already. Do you do you want to unmute?
Sorry, wrong one. No, I was just with my mom yesterday. She's in a memory care facility, but we've already been down that whole journey that you're all talking about at home. Um, but there was a guy leading singing, and she was singing, and I was sitting next to her, and she said, "Oh, I can't get that right," or something like that. And so she recognized, even though she's at the point where she can't really put a sentence together anymore that makes sense, except for, um, like if, "Oh, I love these raspberries," something like very succinct in the moment, she can put that together. But she was struggling yesterday to sing. And I've noticed in the past too, she's struggling because she's always sung harmonies and, all different things we've always sung as a family. And so she was like having a hard time putting the pitch together and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, is this something that also goes, be, she just is going to come to a point where she's not even going to be able to sing anymore? I don't really know.
Um, I'll give you my best shot on this, Jane, and then I think probably Allison will have a lot more to say on this. So, singing is really interesting, and music is really interesting in dementia, because um, language for right-handed people, and most of us are right-handed people, language is focused in the left hemisphere of the brain. Music tends to be focused in the right hemisphere, and dementia doesn't affect all neurons um, the same way. It's not evenly spread out through the brain. It usually affects one part of the brain and another, given the type of dementia. So there are many folks who lose a capacity for using intelligible language, but who can still sing and still appreciate music. And so, just listening to what you just said from the perspective of kind of a neuropsychologist, I would wonder if your mother's brain, right hemisphere of her brain, was in pretty good shape, and she was able to continue singing and appreciating music for longer than the left hemisphere of the brain, appreciating language. But that maybe now, as there's continued to be cell death with the dementia, whether those right hemispheric functions are being affected by the dementia in the same way that the left hemisphere have been affected previously. This is a question to ask your mother's neurologist to get a better answer. But that would be kind of kind of general way how I would think about this. Different functions are affected at different times because they're located in different parts of the brain, and as cells die in different parts of the brain, then you're going to get different functional decline as a result of that cell death. Um, that's a very kind of clinical, technical answer. That's probably not what you're looking for, Jane. I would basically say keep singing, keep singing.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you'll and get her, encourage her to keep singing, for her to maintain that singing that as long as she can, because it's so important for her to feel like she can do this, and it's probably important for you, for maybe to listen to her, or for the two of you to sing together. That becomes one of those tender memories that you really cherish later.
Yeah.
And
You
and
say, oh, I'm
oh,
sorry.
go ahead, Jane.
You say her neurologist, she's on hospice. So as far as specialists and neurologists at this point,
Right.
not probably going to happen. But that is something to keep in mind, that, there are other places I can seek for information. Even if she's not going there, I can just kind of look things up, I guess.
Well, I would also add, Jane, that yeah, there's a possibility that she'll lose the ability to uh, sing a whole song all the way through. It might just be something because dementia spreads throughout the brain. And so people continue to lose skills. That's part of the disease, sadly, part of the disease progression. I don't know if any of you have watched the video of Naomi Feil singing with Mrs. Gladys Wilson, right? So it's Naomi Feil, who is the mother of validation theory, singing with this. There's an older woman, Gladys Wilson, who is completely nonverbal. She's just vacant. She just sort of sits and taps her hand. And Naomi Feil just gets right in her face and she starts singing this song. He's got the whole world in his hands. And he's got, the mother and the father in his hands. And so she's singing it. And Mrs. Wilson starts repeating the in his hands. So she'll say, he's got the little bitty babies. And Gladys Wilson says, in his hands. And so we can then move to things like call and response type of songs. We can do things like songs that they've known since childhood, right? E-I-E-I-O, so that they still get the pleasure of singing. That part of them emotionally is still fulfilled and nourished, and you're helping coach them to do the parts that they can. I agree with Barry completely. Continue to encourage singing, and music is still inside of her. And so even if she cannot get the songs out of her mouth, to still play her favorite music so that she can sing along inside her head. Yeah, bring her the joy. You bet. Tamara, thank you for mentioning the Alzheimer's crisis line. I did pop that phone number in there. Arnie, you were asking about the GUIDE program, which isn't widely publicized, and that it does have respite services. Do you have any feedback on that program? Barry, do you have any thoughts about that? I can pop a few things in too.
I mean, I love the GUIDE program. So to help everybody understand what this is, so the federal government, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, came up with this 9-year-long pilot program to help develop a comprehensive approach to dementia. And it goes under the acronym of GUIDE, G-U-I-D-E. And the GUIDE program it basically has a couple different tenets which have been implemented through various practices in the country now. So one is that that the person with dementia gets a team-based approach, meaning it's not just the physicians, but they may have an occupational therapist involved, they have a care manager involved. And so it's a kind of team. It's not just going to the neurologist's office. You get a more comprehensive approach to the medical and non-medical aspects of dementia. The second major hallmark of the GUIDE program is it puts a lot of emphasis on family caregiver support and education. And the support that the GUIDE program really specifies is the type of respite programs we were just talking about a few minutes ago, but also lots and lots of emphasis on providing caregivers with a basic understanding of dementia, understanding of the course of the disease and some of its treatments and some of the support options that exist out there. And so it's putting together a number of services that we know are helpful for families dealing with dementia, putting them together in one package, going under the guise of GUIDE model, and that GUIDE model is then paid for through Medicare at a higher rate than other services. And so again, this is an initiative that's been launched by the federal government.
I have a follow-up.
Oh, go ahead, Arnie.
I have a follow-up real quick, specifically about respite. My understanding is they will pay for a certain number of respite hours a month.
Yes, they will. And I don't remember, Arnie, how many respite hours they are per year, but they will pay for respite for a certain number of hours a year. And it's up to the family to decide what type of respite they use and whether or not they use respite, but they're going to provide the education, they're going to provide the money, they're going to provide the encouragement to use a respite because they know how important it is for caregivers to be able to sustain themselves over time with the support of respite.
And the big difference is this is Medicare, not Medicaid. So even if you don't qualify,
this is Medicare. It's not Medicaid, right? I mean,
and it's not all Medicare programs, so right. It's not Medicare Advantage. So you have to. I did pop into the chat a link to the website and from CMS, and that website has links that tell you about guide participants throughout the country. And then there are also additional information at the bottom of that sheet that talks about an overview, FAQs, and you should be able to get all of your questions answered there. And then if you are able, and it shows a map also of where all of the guide provisioners are. And so you can check in with those provisioners and see whether or not your Medicare program is one that that covers it. It's a phenomenal program if you can get into it. So I recommend everybody should take a look at Guide and find out whether or not it is something that you and your loved one are applicable, or well, that you, because it's really about caregivers, that you are eligible for.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Scott, who had to leave, said, I've been, Barry, do you have time to just answer a couple of more questions?
Yes, I can. You know what? I have another hour, so I mean, I don't know if
Okay.
everybody wants to stick
We're
around for
gonna
another hour,
power
but I have
through these
time.
questions. If
Let's
anybody
do more
needs to pop
questions,
off.
as long as people want to hang out.
Yep, and I will be sharing the recording with everybody in this room. So if you have to pop off, don't worry about it. And Scott says, I have to leave, but I'm going to listen to the recording in hopes that you answer my question. He said, I've been thinking about whether to continue my mom on her prescription meds for high blood pressure during hospice care. And I want to answer that question, but it's always so important to say that neither Barry nor I are medical doctors. And so anything that we can share with you is our feeling, but that we will sometimes say you should actually talk to your doctor about that. Barry?
So, let's talk about what hospice is. So, hospice is end of life care. When it's not curative, it's basically to help provide somebody live the last weeks or months of their life with as much comfort and joy and meaning as possible. And so a lot of times someone, if they have an illness, they won't go back to the hospital, they won't go back to the emergency room. They'll remain wherever they're obtaining hospice services. When it comes to medicines, the question is always, how will a medicine help somebody live as well as they possibly can for whatever time they have remaining? And so that may mean, for instance, if they were taking allergy medicine and the allergy medicine was helping them to not sneeze so much, then great, we'll keep them on that allergy medicine even though they're now on hospice, because they just want to be able to live the last months of their lives allergy free. That's the kind of a silly example, but you kind of get the idea. In terms of a high blood pressure medicine, the question would be like, what are you hoping to achieve by keeping somebody on a antihypertensive? Would it make your loved one feel better? Would it make them enjoy whatever life they have remaining better on a blood pressure medicine? My guess would be not, but I don't know the circumstances of Scott's of your family member's situation. Maybe it does. Maybe the high blood pressure relieves headaches. Maybe it helps them live in greater comfort and joy another way, which doesn't come to mind. But I think this is a conversation you have with the hospice medical director and the hospice nurses to see if in fact this would be helpful for them to maintain their blood pressure medicine. I lost
realized
you.
I was muted. I agree with that. I think that I'm not at all qualified to say, yes, take them off their medication. I know that just from my personal experience, we wound up before hospice taking my husband off of certain medications, because the question was, if this medication is intended to make him live for another 10 years, to keep his heart healthy for another 10 years, but yet he's probably going to die within the next 8 months. Does it make sense to have him still be on that medication? So it's definitely a conversation to have with a healthcare provider, and it's certainly worth considering. It's a great and an important question. And then I think there was one other I wanted to get to. Robin, you had asked a question, and it's similar. It's about medications. Are there any antidepressants, sleep aids found to be safe or useful or effective for people with Alzheimer's disease, not early stage, about 6 to 7 years in, but still verbal? Barry, do you want to say anything
Yeah.
about that?
I'll say two things. One is the use of antidepressants with people with dementia is very common for a couple reasons. One is to help them with their mood. A second is that the antidepressants can sometimes be helpful for their behavior, especially if they have some behavioral control problems. So it's very common that these medicines be used not in the early stage, the middle stage, and even in the late stage. The second part of my answer is, though, I think this is a conversation you need to have with your physician. If there's a psychiatrist involved, who specializes in this, they can answer really authoritatively, much more so than I can. But if it helps with somebody's quality of life, it helps them behave better, it helps them with their mood. I think the answer would be to maybe continue to keep them on an antidepressant. And generally speaking, most antidepressants can be used quite safely. They don't have a lot of side effects. Particularly, classes of drugs like the SSRIs, they've been around for 50 years. They're used very readily. And there's not a medical reason why someone wouldn't be on these medicines. But that, again, is a conversation you would have with the healthcare provider.
I want to talk about sleep stuff for a second. I just popped in just randomly an article about over-the-counter sleep aids linked to dementia. That doesn't answer your question, Robin, but it's something I think everybody needs to be aware of, is that there is a type of drug called anticholinergic drugs that are really bad for your brain. And a lot of over-the-counter sleep aids, Benadryl, for example, are drugs that are, and I mentioned Benadryl because I know people who take it because it helps me sleep. If you're going to take something to help you sleep, chat with your doctor about it. I really highly recommend that you don't just buy something over the counter. I know I'm not answering Robin's question, but I'm thinking about the people in this room because I know when I was in the thick of caring for my husband, my sleep was just completely messed up and I needed to take something to help me sleep. And I'm really glad that I talked to a doctor because I got something that wouldn't damage my own brain. And so really pay attention. Don't just go buy Unisom tabs or something. The other thing, but regarding the person with dementia, a lot of people at different stages of dementia do take sleep aids that have been prescribed by a doctor. And so again, I would chat with your physician about it. Make sure you have something that's not going to cause them to be so drowsy that then they become a fall risk the next day. Make sure that the dosage is okay. I've seen people who are on crazy dosages of sleep meds that are way beyond what they actually need to be able to help them sleep. And then as a result, the next day they're groggy all day. They keep falling asleep all day, which makes them then stay awake the next night. So they drug them more. It can be a vicious cycle. So please, please work with a healthcare provider if you're going to go in that direction.
Yeah, and I'll just say one other thing. When it comes to sleep, doctors have many different choices of classes of drugs. There's probably like a half dozen different classes of drugs that are used to help us sleep. And I absolutely agree with what you said, Allison, to stay away from anticholinergic drugs like Benadryl, but there are many other choices that are safe even with folks who have dementia.
Yeah. And I think the last thing we'll get to is that, Tamara, you said I visited a couple of memory care facilities in anticipation. I'm going to do a little word thing there. I'm going to call them memory care communities instead of facilities. I think we're trying to move away from that kind of language that means like we're sticking somebody in an institution. Memory care communities in anticipation of, I don't think my loved one is ready for it yet. What kinds of questions should I ask as I go for a tour? Are there funding options for this? It might be a lengthy, it is lengthy. I would say this, absolutely go visit places. And then your question is, what questions should I ask? I popped a couple of things into the chat from the Alzheimer's Association and the Alzheimer's Foundation that are the kinds of things you should ask when you're going to visit long-term care communities. I would also recommend that you chat with other people whose loved ones are in long-term care and ask them, what do you wish you had asked before it started? Like one of the things I wished I had asked is, does this price cover everything? Because I found out after we were in, it's like, I have to pay for laundry? I have to pay for each shower? So make sure you really understand what the pricing is, what the price includes. I'm sure that there are people in the room who have loved ones who are in long-term care who might have some ideas about what to ask. Another thing that I did is I worked with an organization that I don't pay, the community pays them. And I talked to them about what kind of questions they would suggest that I ask when I go in for a visit. And they were actually very, very helpful. Some of those organizations that help you find a place for a person are great. Some of them are less great because they have contracts with very specific communities. And so those are the communities that they're going to show you. So just, just operate with caution when you're seeking advice and counsel about what might be a good place for the person that you support. And yes, we could have a whole session on just how do you choose a memory care community. But there are lots and lots of resources online that are incredibly helpful. Is there anything that anybody wants to toss out there for Robin, just some specific, or for Tamara rather, about just some specific things that you have run into?
Yeah, just the AARP also has a list of questions to ask choosing a memory care community.
Oh, that is beautiful. Okay, thank you very much. So AARP.
Yeah, so when I say AARP, so on the AARP website, I will put in AARP questions to ask about memory care community and see what comes up.
Okay, that sounds great. And let me just see if we've covered it. I thought Tamara had another question. Just go back. How can I get my loved one to socialize and this will be our last question for today. How do I get my loved one to socialize if I have to initiate everything? So far, I take him to bingo at the senior center every week and he enjoys that and sits with the same people every time. We attend church, but every other activity we have to guide. So how do I get my loved one to socialize if I'm the one who has to initiate everything? Is there anything you'd like to say about that, Barry?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. One is that there are people who by personality just tend to be introverted and they're never, it's like bringing a little leery about making this comparison, but it's like if you were raising children, you took a kid to the playground so they can play with the other kids and instead your child clung to you the whole time. That's just the kind of kid they are. That's their temperament. And so I don't know if your dad was always a shy person and maybe he never socialized very much. You're not going to teach him to socialize at this point in his life. The other thing you really need to take into account is that the capacity for socializing may decrease as a result of dementia, and the capacity to initiate activities often decreases as a result of dementia, particularly in the mild to moderate stage, which means that people don't even if they say, yeah, I know I need to go do this, they don't get themselves up out of the chair to do this. They don't initiate things. You really have to initiate it for them because they no longer have the cognitive capacity to kind of get moving and do this for them. Sometimes it's just a matter of kind of making the initial introduction for them and kind of pushing them a little bit and then letting them take it from there to get them over the hump. But on their own, this is the kind of frontal lobe function. They lose that capacity to initiate those sort of social activities. And so the short answer, Tamara, is it may not be possible to get your dad to initiate, socializing, and you may have to continue to initiate everything for him.
Yeah, I I would agree with that. Apathy is a big part of what happens to a lot of people during dementia. They just sort of lose their interest and their oomph in doing things and are very reluctant to start something unless you initiate it. And I think that for us, we need to put ourselves just into the mindset of patience and being okay with that and recognizing that sometimes if somebody really does want to just stay at home and listen to music or just wants to sit and look out the window, that we need to be respectful of that too. I think that also when we learn things like, oh my gosh, one of the best things that we can do to support with a person with dementia is make sure that they're getting enough exercise. And so we're trying to like, come on, we need to go for a walk. The doctor says that it's good for your brain to go for a walk. Get your shoes on, we're going for a walk. Whoa, that's not going to get you anywhere. You can invite things, you can encourage things, but at the end of the day, they are an adult who has choices and who has things that they like and they don't like. And when we push too hard, we wind up just creating trouble. So anyway, yeah, thank you, Allie. She says, Mom has talked about watering her plants for 6 months. Can't do the next step. Once I bring the watering can out and speak up about the next steps, she gets up and will start helping me. That's brilliant, right? That's what we can
Yeah.
do. is that we set up these things called cognitive ramps, where we create opportunities for people to be successful by making sure that they're able to take part in some of those steps, even if we're the ones who coach or who model those steps. My friends, I am so grateful to you for being here today. Stephen says one of the best sessions. Thank you. I couldn't agree more. Barry, it has been such a pleasure to have you here. Would you hold up your book one more time?
You don't have to ask me twice. Here it is.
The AARP Caregiver Answer book. I just so highly recommend it. I did buy the book, and I love it. And you can see the experience, the passion, the empathy that Barry brings to this world. And I'm just so incredibly thankful to everybody in the room, especially to Barry, for being here to guide this discussion. Okay.
Well,
Have
thank you, Allison. This is wonderful for me, and thank you all. This is great interaction, great questions.
They were really great questions. And of course, you will be getting the yes, gay. We will be sending out a recording to everybody who attended today. So, and then we also do put it on our YouTube channel, so it's out there. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Keep
Good
being
luck, everyone.
amazing. Bye.